What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over some risky middle round wide receivers. With the importance of hitting on these early round running backs that have guaranteed volume and safety, we find ourselves relying more and more on these middle round receivers to help fill the gaps in our rosters. The players we're going over in this video can be found in rounds 5 through 9, so some of the players on this list could be starters for your team as early as week 1. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which quarterback had the highest red zone completion rate. The correct answer? Drew Brees. Congratulations, Connor McLeod, you got this one right. Let's see who can get today's question right. Today's stat of the day: which running back had the most targets inside the 10-yard line? Once again, that's which running back had the most targets inside the 10-yard line. Leave your answer in the comment section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, consider signing up for our draft package. It's loaded with information, and all-in access members are automatically entered for signed sports memorabilia giveaways. Most recently, Deontay Johnson signed jersey, courtesy of Pristine Auction. So if you guys are interested in that, consider checking out our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. Link for that, as always, in the description box below. With that stuff out of the way though, let's hop right into the video, and the first player I want to go over is Darius Slayton of the New York Giants. Currently, in order to land Darius Slayton on your team, it's going to take a 9th round pick. Right now, he's coming off the board as a back-end wide receiver 4, and from what I've been seeing so far this offseason, not too many people are thrilled about taking him at that price point. He's coming into his sophomore season after being drafted in the 5th round of the 2019 draft, so not super heavy draft capital invested in him. He was more of a developmental product, one with a limited route tree, but that didn't seem to hold him back whatsoever. Through 14 games, he compiled 48 receptions, 740 receiving yards to go along with 8 receiving touchdowns. 8 receiving touchdowns not only led all rookie wide receivers, but it was also a figure that ranked top 10 in the entire league. Those numbers were good for a wide receiver 32 finish in fantasy points per game, but heading into the 2020 fantasy draft, he is being taken over 10 spots lower than that, being drafted outside the top 40 wide receivers. At first glance, that screams value, but the main reason for that is the competition for targets around him may be much higher this season as opposed to a season ago. Last year, Sterling Shepard, Evan Engram, and Golden Tate all missed time by either suspension or injury, which ultimately left Darius Slayton to be the most reliable receiver on this team, and that's with him only playing in 14 games. It's still surprising to see the general public so low on Darius Slayton because everybody is very high on Daniel Jones, myself included. While Daniel Jones, his fantasy stock and value is rising, he's climbing up the draft boards, but if you look at the other receivers for the Giants, their ADPs are tanking. We're seeing them being taken much lower than we've seen in seasons past, and that's a clear indication that everyone's well aware of the injury risks surrounding them. Evan Engram, his games played have reduced each season as a pro. Sterling Shepard has only been healthy in 50% of his seasons, and Golden Tate, he's not getting any younger. So would it surprise anybody if throughout the season Darius Slayton does continue to see more and more opportunities? If these players do end up going down with injury, the likelihood of all of them remaining healthy is extremely low, and I'm here to tell you, Darius Slayton doesn't need an injury in order to produce for your fantasy team. In fact, he's the type of player to produce on very minimal volume. It may surprise you to hear that top 36 wide receiver production came on the back of ranking 75th in receptions. It's easy to see that Darius Slayton is a different type of player when compared to the other receivers like Shepard, Engram, and Tate, all 3 of which are very volume reliant receivers. The Giants offense itself, it is a West Coast offense focusing on the short passing game, the specialty of both Shepard and Tate. And as for Evan Engram, while he is the one better suited to stretch the field, we can't forget that while he's been a fantasy relevant player while healthy, his points have always come on the back of heavy volume. Darius Slayton, however, there were only 2 receivers that posted more fantasy points than him on fewer targets in 2019. Those 2 players, Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill. So to have Darius Slayton's name in that hat, it shows you exactly the type of player he is. I will admit there is room for his touchdown rate to decrease. He scored a touchdown 1 on every 10.5 targets, but what he may lose out on when it comes to efficiency, he's going to make up for it through the trust and chemistry he built with Daniel Jones in the 2019 season. Would it surprise anyone if all of these receivers stayed healthy and Darius Slayton's production still continued to rise highs, it shouldn't surprise anybody. And right now, he's currently going in the 9th round, so he's going to sit on your bench. You're not going to need to rely on him in week 1, and with the likelihood of the receivers around him potentially missing time as the season goes on, you could have a player that lines up his best performances of this season in the final weeks of the year where it matters most, the fantasy playoffs. Let's transition over to a player with a bit higher of an ADP, and that's DJ Chark of the Jacksonville Jaguars. DJ Chark had a complete breakout campaign, especially during the first half of the season. Through his first 8 games, DJ Chark posted 15 or more fantasy points in 5 of 8 contests. That's wide receiver 1 production. As it stands today, you can currently get him in the 5th round. He's currently being ranked at about a back-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, and if that's where he goes in drafts, that's going to present a lot of value for your fantasy team. This year, there's virtually no competition at the quarterback position to challenge Gardner Minshew. Minshew will have every opportunity to succeed, but it will be his job to lose. In the connection we saw between Chark and Minshew, we likely wouldn't see the same type of production if the quarterback were different. For those of you who don't know the background of DJ Chark, he is a relatively new name in the fantasy space considering he did just break out last season, but he brings a rare combination of size and speed. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. He runs a 4.34 40 and is a 90th plus percentile athlete in every measurable category. Unfortunately for his 2019 season, there were a couple of factors that held back his overall production. The first being was when Gardner Minshew did lose the starting job, we didn't see the same connection with Nick Foles as we did with Minshew, so that did impact his overall numbers, at least at the same pace we were expecting from the first half of the season. And the second part was he was banged up with an ankle injury towards the tail end of the season, which did hinder some of his overall production. Typically when players start hot and end slow, their ADP, it tanks a bit, and vice versa. If they do start slow and end hot, usually that results in them climbing up the draft boards. This is one of the main reasons why DJ Chark finished as the wide receiver 17, but is being drafted several spots lower than that. A couple of other factors to consider is his style of play. His style of play is much more similar to that of the boom bust style flex receivers than that of a bona fide wide receiver 1 possession receiver, and with those types of players, the peaks and valleys when it comes to their weekly fantasy production usually has a high amount of variance. There is a difference though with DJ Chark. DJ Chark is a special athlete. When he's making those plays, these are the types of plays he can consistently make as long as he's given the opportunity. Think Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill does not get a lot of volume, yet he still performs as a wide receiver 1 consistently. While I'm not saying DJ Chark is as talented as Tyreek Hill, their skill sets, they're very similar. Another factor which leads people to consider him risky is that we just haven't seen it before. In 2018, his rookie season, he only compiled 174 receiving yards, and we have seen with players in the past that they do have these outlier years in which they perform very well for fantasy, then come crashing back to earth the following season after their ADP skyrockets and people pay full price for them. So some fantasy owners may not want to take that risk and opt to draft a player who has some name value and name recognition, somebody that's produced in seasons past that has a history of being a top contributor in their offense. And while his skill set does lead us to believe that his performances were replicatable, there is a level of risk in taking a player who's only performed for 1 season. Overall though, we are fine with taking DJ Chark where he's currently being drafted. We do have him as a mid-round wide receiver target. Just be wary of pairing him with another receiver that may have week-to-week volatility issues. For example, Amari Cooper. This could come back to bite you in the butt in the fantasy playoffs when it's win or go home. Up next, we have Jamison Crowder of the New York Jets, and this is definitely a player who's been growing on me recently. Quietly, Crowder finished as the 16th wide receiver when it comes to total targets in 2019. That is an extremely respectable number, especially when you consider he had more targets than players like Chris Godwin, Amari Cooper, and even Kenny Golladay. While those players are bona fide wide receiver 1s, clearly Jamison Crowder disappointed with that volume. He did finish outside the top 30, but he was still a wide receiver 3 and one that played relatively consistently throughout the season. There were only 2 games last season in which he had fewer than 5 targets, and what's even more of a positive sign is that towards the tail end of the season, we saw his target market share continue to increase. Not all targets are created equally though, and with Sam Darnold throwing you the ball, even on shallow routes, you're not going to be able to catch everything that comes your way, but volume typically translates to fantasy points, and while the New York Jets did draft a first round wide receiver, you can guarantee Jamison Crowder's role in the offense is going to remain the same. What bodes even better for his situation is that last year was his first year on the New York Jets team. Typically, wide receivers do struggle in year 1 and show massive improvement in year 2 on their new teams, and Jamison Crowder is heading into that second season. It'll be his second offseason, his second full year working with Sam Darnold, and it's undeniable that the chemistry built between Sam Darnold and Jamison Crowder in 2019 is going to lead them a step ahead in 2020 when comparing them to the 2019 season. And don't get it mistaken, Adam Gase is no stranger to targeting the slot position. Think back to his early days with Wes Welker to as recent as his days in Miami. In year 1 with Jarvis Landry, he averaged over 8 targets per game, bumped that up to over 10 targets per game in year 2. If we see those types of increases find their way to Jamison Crowder, he may not only have the ability to increase his fantasy points per target by building off of the chemistry gained in the 2019 season, but there's still also a potential to increase in the target department as well, an area where he already finished top 16. If one or possibly both of those things happen, this is a pick that could have some sneaky upside disguised as a risky pick. The final risky mid-round wide receiver we have is none other than Deebo Samuel of the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of people are very hyped on Deebo Samuel this year, and from what we saw from him in his rookie season, it's for good reason. However, there still are major factors in which make him one of the riskiest picks in the middle rounds, in part due to volume, and large in part due to injury concerns. It's not that he's a bad pick or that this is overall a bad offense. Simply put, Jimmy Garoppolo spreads the ball around as good as any quarterback in the league. San Francisco is no stranger to having very run-heavy game scripts, also games where they exploit matchups where George Kittle may get most of the targets and receptions, and with volume concerns, there is always going to be consistency issues on a week-by-week basis. He may have the numbers when it comes to the final results at the end of the season, but he may compile those stats through a handful of games as opposed to consistently producing at a high level each week. That presents some risk, especially if the overall expectation for Deebo Samuel is that he does have to outperform his 2019 season. I did mention Deebo Samuel in an earlier breakdown in this video because Deebo Samuel posted an incredible amount of fantasy points despite having a very modest amount of targets. He may have some of those weeks where the volume may not come his way, but for a player who has proven to maximize his fantasy points per opportunity, this isn't necessarily a death sentence. What is going to be a major concern for us is, despite him playing in 15 games last season, throughout his entire college career, he has been very injury prone. Part of the knocks and the reasons why he did fall to the 36th overall pick in the draft was due to the fact that he may have some durability concerns as he entered the NFL. He proved to be pretty durable in 2019, but we can't throw out the years of history we have on him throughout his college career, where he had suffered both soft tissue injuries as well as ones that ended his season. If he does remain healthy, we can definitely see him returning value at his draft position, but remember, we haven't seen him throughout his entire career, including college, receive anything more than 63 receptions in a single season, a mark he did not surpass in his rookie year, maxing out at 57 receptions, a mark that's a far cry away from what the top receivers in the league are producing each year. We currently have Deebo Samuel ranked as wide receiver 35, 5 spots below ECR, so we're definitely factoring in some of that risk, but let us know in the comment section down below which players you're targeting in the mid rounds and which ones you're avoiding. If you guys did enjoy the video, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.